Welcome to Mike's Retro Curiosities, where we explore the wonderful world of retro games. Although today we're kind of breaking the rules a little bit, because today we're taking a look at the Final Fantasy XIV Online TTRPG Standard Rulebook. And at the time of recording, I think this one only came out about a month or two ago, which definitely makes it a little too young to be truly counted as a retro curiosity. But Final Fantasy XIV Online did come out in 2010, so it is certainly old enough to be considered retro at this point. And plus, I just really wanted to talk about this one. So yeah, this is a tabletop RPG that's based off of an MMORPG. Final Fantasy XIV was released a while back. Its first release was pretty rocky, but eventually it got its footing with Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn, and since then it's been very popular and very successful, even managing to surpass the popularity of World of Warcraft. They released a starter pack for this about a year ago in 2024, and they've only just released the standard rulebook now. I decided to check this game out for a few different reasons. First off, this game definitely lured me in with its absolutely jaw-dropping artwork. This game looks absolutely amazing, and that's something that you're going to notice throughout it. It has some amazing art. Granted, I'm pretty sure that none of the art in here is actually for the TTRPG. It's probably all for the MMO, but even still. Secondly, I've always kind of wanted to check out Final Fantasy XIV Online. I've heard a lot of really good stuff about it. Especially I've heard that it really raised the bar for storytelling in MMOs. But unfortunately, I couldn't for a couple of reasons. First off, I simply don't have enough time nowadays to devote to an MMO. Another reason is that I generally like to play MMOs with my friends, and none of them were playing this one. And also, I don't really have much of a stable internet connection at the moment. So yeah, an MMO like this one is kind of a no-go. So I had kind of hoped that this game would be sort of an introduction into the world of Final Fantasy XIV Online. I had also read a free sample of the rules that the people who made this game released for free online, and it seemed pretty good. At least it seemed decent. You know, it played a bit like D&D 4th Edition. And D&D 4th Edition was a fine system. It just didn't feel very much like D&D. And so I kind of figured that at worst, this would be essentially a reskin of D&D 4th Edition with a Final Fantasy theme. And oh boy, this one did not meet my expectations at all. Okay, I'm going to stop beating around the bush here. This is quite possibly the worst tabletop RPG I have ever seen in my life. Like, granted, I have to admit I haven't read through many bad RPGs. I haven't really plumbed the depths of the medium. I've read a bunch of them, and I've played a bunch of them, and I generally try to keep to the ones that are more critically acclaimed. But, yeah, of the ones I've read and played, this one is just absolutely wretched. It fails in pretty much every way imaginable. Nonetheless, I do think that this game is interesting and worth examining, if nothing else for the fact that it kind of shows you exactly how not to make a tabletop RPG. And beyond that, I had to spend $70 on this thing, so by God, I'm going to get my money's worth one way or another. So yeah, buckle up, because this is going to be a long one. Okay, first off, the opening to this game is fairly standard as far as these sorts of games go. You know, it kind of introduces you into the idea of what a TTRPG is, and it does a decent job of it. You know, it has a decent onboarding process, although if this is your first time reading it, and I don't recommend you read it because, again, this game is not very good, but if this is, you may want to skip around to some of the later chapters. Like, I kind of recommend going from character creation to playing the game and then back to jobs. So anyway, moving forward a little bit, we get into character creation. And one of the first things I actually discovered here, and this is actually a feature I quite like, is they have a feature called Glamours. The way it works is that it's a magical spell which is actually quite common in mythology and folklore, that lets you take on any appearance you want. So it doesn't matter what equipment you have or how your character is normally dressed, what weapons they use, they can kind of look like anything you want them to. Which actually I do kind of like. It makes sense within a high magic universe such as this one. I mean, let's face it, if glamours existed in the real world, you know that the first thing that they'd be used for is fashion. Moving on, another thing I kind of like is how they include basically character creation options in the form of a table so that you can roll them with your dice. I definitely like having that sort of option to sort of randomly generate characters. Although one thing that kind of started raising some red flags for me is the fact that there are very few options on these tables. There's only about 5 of them. The 6th one is to create your own option or choose from the table, which if you're rolling for an option, then why would you want to create your own? Like that's kind of a contradiction. Now here we have profile traits, which kind of function a bit like this game's skill system. Although it's very sort of loose and open-ended, the idea is that you create skills that which you get advantage dice on based on if you meet certain conditions. So for example, your character might know about herbalism, but only in a specific region of the world during a specific time of the day. This is fine. It does allow for a good amount of customization, but again, there are very few sort of pre-made options. It really kind of feels like they're sort of offloading the task of creating these skills to the player, and, that's, to some extent, I like the option to do that, but it's kind of weird that they wouldn't include, like, a bunch of these by default, like, include a few of them for each class or something. There's also titles, which basically function like feats. They kind of give you additional bonuses to some of your abilities and such. Again, not a whole lot of variety. This is literally all of the titles that they have available by default. Like, they give you the ability to sort of create your own, sure, but again, you'd think there'd be a lot more. Like, in D&D, there would be pages of this stuff. Next up are naming conventions and sort of character names. And man, they go really overboard with it. Like, I kind of applaud the world building of it, but yeah, they go into a ton of detail about things like various naming conventions for the different cultures. And they spend about 13 pages on naming conventions alone. Meanwhile, they only spent about 3 pages on skills. It kind of feels like the priorities here are mixed up. Beyond that, you also have races, which honestly are fine. You've kind of got your default ones, like you've got humans, elves, stuff like that, basically halflings. You've got some more unique ones, like cat people and such. They work fine. They don't really affect your stats at all, but it's fine. So from here, we then get into the realm of jobs, and it is from here where all hope will be lost. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here, because this is where the excrement hits the proverbial fan. Let's just jump right into it, I guess. So, well, first I should probably mention that in MMO fashion, it kind of splits characters into 3 roles: tank, healer, and DPS. That's fine. It just, again, the way that they handle it is going to be horrific. Now, if you look at this screen, at these 2 pages, at first it doesn't really look like anything is too wrong, but you take a closer look, you start to realize just how bad this thing is. So what's so bad about this? Well, I'm so glad you asked. First off, you might notice that there aren't many levels here. In fact, there's only 5. You go from level 30 to level 40, level 50, level 55, and level 60. Yeah, you jump levels by 10s at a time. Now, this is wrong for several reasons. First off, why wouldn't you just start at level 1? Granted, I'm sure that these are based off of levels from the MMO, and it appears that they kind of want you to start off relatively competent. They don't want you to start off, like, not having any abilities or not knowing anything. But why skip ahead, and why, starting from nothing is kind of part of what makes a TTRPG fun. You start off as just some guy who doesn't know anything except maybe how to swing a sword, and he gradually becomes the hero of the land. This also means that you don't really get the more granular leveling experience that's so much fun in both a tabletop RPG as well as in an MMO. You kind of just jump from one power level to another, and it's quite jarring. Beyond that, there's also the problem that there's no XP in this game. So yeah, it's entirely based on milestone leveling. And I don't mind milestone leveling, I'm fine with that. But I also like to have the option of leveling up through XP. And really, isn't like one of the great joys in an MMO, the process of leveling up? Isn't that part of what makes it so much fun? The same thing is true in a tabletop RPG. So by removing that, it's kind of a major flaw. Like, they really make it a lot less fun. But it gets much worse than that, because here's another thing. You might notice all these stats here, and you might notice also that there was no page that tells you how to generate stats. That's because you don't generate your stats. Every class at whatever level has exactly the same stats. Yes, let me repeat that. Every paladin at 30th level has exactly the same stats as every other paladin at 30th level. And my god, that is just so lame, man. Like, being able to customize your stats is one of the fundamentals of character customization. Without it, you really don't have any creative control over your character. As an example, I often like to play as characters who go against type, or who have some sort of critical weakness, or something like that. But no, you can't do that here. Again, every character is more or less as competent as the game tells you they are. This also means that in terms of character creation, pretty much everything you do is purely cosmetic. There's nothing here that really affects the game on a mechanical level. But hold on, because it gets even worse. And that's because you don't get to choose what abilities you have. Like, yes, every 30th level paladin has exactly these abilities, no more, no less. Same thing with 40th level paladins, 50th level paladins, and so on and so forth. And my god, like, that is just so incredibly ridiculous. Like, one of the great joys in both MMOs as well as tabletop RPGs is getting to pick your custom loadout. It's getting to customize and kind of make the character your own. Another issue you may have noticed is that none of these abilities include any description of what they do beyond the purely mechanical. In tabletop RPGs, there's a thing called theater of the mind. It's basically this idea that as you're telling the story, the characters are sort of imagining what's happening in the game. It's not just number crunching and stuff and rolling dice. There's a sort of aspect of storytelling going on here. And without descriptions, you can't really tell what exactly is happening when you use any given ability. Granted, some abilities are rather self-explanatory, like Shield Bash. Okay, you bash someone with a shield, but what the heck does Total Eclipse do? Beyond that, you also need descriptions in order to facilitate the use of these abilities outside of combat. Like what inevitably happens is that, say, that they come to a door and it's locked and they have no way of picking it or anything. And so inevitably, someone will say, okay, I want to use one of my attack abilities to try and break the lock. Is that possible? Well, with these abilities, I don't know. Inevitably, players will try to reason and find different ways to use their abilities outside of what they're intended for, and without descriptions, you have no idea whether or not that makes sense or not. Beyond that, there's also some problems with the abilities themselves, like how some abilities are blatantly better than others. Like, you can only do one primary ability per turn, so here you've got Paladin Combo, which does 2 damage and inflicts enmity, and has a combo. And then you've got Shield Lob, which does 2 damage and inflicts enmity, but has no combo. So obviously the Paladin combo is inherently superior to Shield Lob. Like, why would you use this when you had this, which does everything and more? Now, in an MMO, these sorts of abilities would make sense because you have cooldowns. So while you're waiting for this one to recharge, you would use this ability. But since that's not how it works in a tabletop RPG, because it's turn-based, it means that some abilities are pretty much useless, at least as far as I could tell. Another issue that I've noticed is that there's actually a lot of sort of repeat information between these various pages that show different level characters. I kind of get the sense that they really just wanted you to sort of photocopy the ability page of whatever character class and level you are, and so that this way you could just have it at any time, but still, it kind of feels like a waste of space. For that matter, many abilities between two different classes within the same archetype are very similar. Like, here you have Tomahawk, which is basically the same thing as Shield Toss, deals 2 damage, inflicts enmity on the target. Now, I know that these are both tank classes, but even still, I'm sure you could create a system that includes a lot more varied abilities. It really seems to sort of lack creativity. Now we get to the equipment section, and at this point you may be breathing a sigh of relief, thinking that the worst is behind us. Oh, honey, no, the worst is yet to come. Just wait and see. So first off, this game doesn't use gold or gil or anything like that. Instead it uses fortune. Fortune is kind of an abstract way of representing wealth. So stuff costs a certain amount of fortune. And this isn't really a huge problem, but it is kind of lame. I mean, like, what sounds more appealing? Oh yes, you open a chest and you find 100 pieces of gil or gold, or you open a chest and you find 10 fortune. Another thing I should probably mention is that adventuring supplies are pretty much completely abstracted. Like, there's no getting, like, sort of your standard pack of, like, a rope and stuff. Like, no, it just, your character automatically has everything that they would need for pretty much any situation, which, again, isn't a massive problem, but it is, again, pretty lame. It makes players feel clever when they thought to, say, bring a grappling hook or something that they end up then needing. So yeah, here they go over things like various potions, food items, stuff like that you can get. So it was at this point when I realized that there was another massive omission, and that there's no equipment, basically. Like, your character already has, like, all of their equipment, and it's pretty much already calculated into all of their stats and everything. So, like, a warrior will always have the same armor, the same weapons, stuff like that. And wow, that is really bad. For one thing, that cuts off another aspect of customization and meaningful choice for your players. You also don't get to go shopping or find better weapons or armor, and isn't one of the joys in an MMO getting cool loot? I mean, it's ridiculous. There also aren't really any special or enhanced weapons. So there sort of is. There's this thing called augmentation, but these are sort of more generic bonuses that you can apply to any pieces of equipment. But as a result of lacking any kind of gear, really, it means that this game lacks one of the greatest sort of extrinsic motivators in TTRPGs. Like, how do you get your players to go to the Tomb of Horrors? Well, simple. You tell them that there's a really cool magic sword waiting for them. This also really kind of limits the creativity of what DMs, or GMs in this case, can really do with their players. One of the classic things you might have is a surprise attack when your characters are under-equipped. Maybe they took off their armor and weapons to go to sleep or something like that. Or you might even have something like, say, a shipwreck adventure, where the players end up shipwrecked and losing all their stuff, and they have to get it back, and they have to improvise with whatever they can come across. Now, in this game, you can't do that. It's impossible. And, I understand that perhaps this game couldn't include every, magic item or special item in the MMO. That would probably be way too much. I'm sure there are thousands, but you could at least include some. I mean, give me something to work with here. God, give me strength. So next, gets into the basics of combat. And when I first read this, it seemed okay, but then, like with everything else, once you actually get into this thing, it really starts to fall apart. First off, you physically cannot die in this game. It's impossible. Your character just gets knocked out. Now, this is obviously a massive problem, considering that removing the possibility of death pretty much removes all tension and immersion from any encounter. It pretty much, in fact, they even suggest just resetting an enemy encounter if the player loses, which, my god, that is so lame. And I get that this game is based off of an MMO where you can't die, but one, an MMO is a fundamentally different medium from a tabletop RPG, and they convey the same ideas in very different ways. And two, MMOs still usually have some sort of penalty for dying that makes you want to avoid it. The only real consequence for dying in this game is the weakness enfeeblement, which gives you a minor stat debuff, but is otherwise not much of a penalty, honestly. But it is far, far worse than that, because here's the big thing. Battles pretty much reset when they end. That means that all of your HP and NP completely recover. It's as if the fight never happened. The only exception to that is with multi-phase battles. It's kind of like, you have a boss fight and the boss is like, oh, let me show you my true form, and, they transform, stuff like that. Sometimes the boss gets reinforcements or, stuff can happen. But aside from that, like, when you go from battle to the overworld, like, that's it. It's as if nothing happened. Like, you do lose items, and, again, you can sort of gain the weakness status effect, but that's about it. And this is a humongous problem for many reasons. First off, it makes encounters with weaker enemies basically pointless, because in regular RPGs, you would fight against sort of low-level mobs, and the point of them is that they kind of slowly wear you down over time. It's kind of about resource management. You're trying to get to the big boss without having to use up too much health or magic or what have you before then. But in this game, there's basically no point. I mean, you don't even get, gold or XP or weapons or anything from defeating enemies. It means that for encounters to be in any way meaningful, they basically all have to be boss fights. And if every encounter is a boss fight, then that basically means that none of them are. It really kind of destroys the pacing. Like, if you fight boss after boss after boss, you basically become numb to them after a while. There's usually a sense of gradual escalation when fighting enemies in these games. This is kind of game design 101, but not so much here. Again, if you're not fighting a boss level enemy, then there's literally no point. And this, combined with the lack of death, means that basically players have no reason to take the game seriously because there are no consequences. One aspect of this game that I find to be rather bizarre, this isn't really a huge problem, but is the fact that most characters only ever have at most 5 MP, 5 magic points, and this does not go up as you level up. You recover magic points sort of naturally over the course of time, but yeah, you don't increase your magic power. Basically, you just gain more magic spells, more abilities that use magic, and your old abilities kind of get cheaper or become more powerful. Another thing I should probably mention, which also rather annoys me, is the fact that you pretty much have to use a mat in this game. There is no sort of abstracting that out. Now, I don't mind using a mat, but I like having the option, especially with smaller encounters or when it's just one big guy against the entire party and everyone's in melee distance with each other. It doesn't really require the mat, but in this game, you really can't go without it. Everything is built around it. Luckily, they include various mats and tokens and such, but which is nice. They encourage you to photocopy it. But yeah, again, I wish that it wasn't required for literally every fight. So here we have a section on sort of adventuring and role-playing outside of battle. This is mostly okay. Like, it kind of uses very standard sort of D20 stuff. You know, you roll, the GM gives you a challenge rating, you have stat bonuses, stuff like that. You know, you can gain advantage dice. However, it's really rather vague about a number of details. Like, there's very little information about what scenarios require what roles, how to use abilities outside of battle, stuff like that. It really kind of feels like battle and what occurs outside of it are completely different games, and it really feels that they didn't account for much happening outside of battle. This really feels like it's essentially a game that's built entirely around battle, with the ability to roleplay and do other stuff kind of awkwardly bolted on. Yeah, this is mostly sort of standard stuff. There's information about, like, playing the game itself, the role of the GM, stuff like that. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. It very much feels underbaked in parts. One part I find odd is that they have a specific mechanic for pausing a game and resuming it at a later time. They call it quick saving, which, yeah, I know that that's a thing from the game, but you really didn't need to include this as its own mechanic. Like, people just kind of did that naturally, you know. You sort of take a picture of whatever the board state is like, and you sort of, or write down whatever's happening, and you come back later. I mean, this feels unnecessary. Now, one thing I actually do like in this game is its use of downtime between adventures. It kind of has specific mechanics for it, where you can do stuff like gather materials, forge different items, stuff like that. It's not bad, honestly. A lot of players sort of often struggle with finding ways to fill their free time, so it is nice that they give you options here. So this next section basically details sort of the setting and the world of Final Fantasy XIV. And after all this horribleness that came before, I had hoped that this might be the game's saving grace. So I figured that even if the game itself is horrible, if the setting is interesting, then, maybe you can use it for other games. It might be interesting to read. I enjoy reading about fantastic worlds, and I was looking forward to this one. Oh boy, yeah, I definitely didn't learn anything from the previous almost 200 pages, because this would end up disappointing me all over again. Now, one thing you will notice is that this map of the world is almost impossible to read. And yes, this is the only world map you have. There's another copy of it, like earlier in the book, but it's literally the exact same map, and it's all written in this very sort of stylized, pseudo-Old English way. And it's almost impossible to figure out where anything is. Like, a few things I was able to figure out, like Lamsa is here because, it's split into two words. You can kind of figure that out. But other locations, I have no idea where they are. Also, this is pretty much the only description you get of the world and sort of the geopolitics of what's going on in it. There's no real section on history and stuff, and while what's written here is interesting, it leaves out a lot of stuff that you would want to know. Like, in earlier parts of the book, it mentions stuff like the Cataclysm. That is never mentioned here. Now, yeah, I know that the Cataclysm is when that giant meteor crashed into the game, literally resetting it for Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn, but, I would still like some background behind such an earth-shattering event, what caused it and stuff like that. Give me something, come on. Many of the major cities or sort of civilizations in this game kind of get their own sort of write-up, and I actually do think this is pretty good. It gives you an idea of the government, the religion, various industries, different organizations at work. It gives you a pretty decent overview of this place. Now, here's where it all goes wrong. This map, honestly, there are several maps just like it. These are all horrible for use in a TTRPG. First off, there's no key, which means that that I have no idea what many of these icons are. Like, yeah, some are self-explanatory, like you have bags, which are probably shops, you have, you have chocobos, which are probably stables, but other ones, I have no idea what the heck they are. Like, what do these crystal things mean, the game should tell me. Beyond that, there are other issues as well. For one thing, these are all maps that are part of the same area, and yet I have no idea how they connect to one another. So, these arrows sort of all indicate places where you go off the edge of one map and come onto the edge of another, and yet, I have no idea where anything is in relation to anything else. On occasion, you'll get a hint, like, it'll tell you, like this area here is beyond, like, a gate that is mentioned in one of the previous entries, but they could have more clearly labeled that, and most of the time you don't even get that. I'd honestly be willing to bet good money that these maps were probably ripped directly out of the Final Fantasy XIV strategy guide. I haven't read that, but please let me know if that is the case. Beyond that, another issue is, what is it exactly that forms the barriers of these maps? Like, as a GM, you kind of need to describe to the players what they're looking at. And obviously, some players are going to want to actually explore these other areas. So what exactly is here? What is blocking them? In a video game, you kind of just accept that there are things like invisible walls and certain natural barriers. But here, what are they looking at? Are these things blocked by cliffs, mountains, the ocean? I don't know. Also, while there are many areas within this map that are described, many others really aren't. Some parts are self-explanatory, like Madam Bridge. Okay, that's obviously a bridge of some sort. But what is the Eyes? What is the Mourning Widow? Like, I don't know what any of these, what a lot of these things are. You can't just tell me that these things are here and not tell me what they are. So yeah, you get a bunch of these locations, and yes, they're all this confusing. They don't really describe to you sort of the antagonistic empire or their lands, which is a shame. And in general, even after reading this whole thing, I don't really have a clear idea of the geography of a lot of these places. It's really a failure of this entire thing. In the back of the book, you have a few sort of pre-made scenarios. These are honestly fine for the most part. They are kind of samey, like they kind of go through similar motions, but they're okay for what they are. And I do appreciate sort of having them in here. It kind of makes for a more complete package, and it kind of gives you an idea of how this game is meant to be played. Oftentimes, with a new game, even after you've read all the rules, you can kind of be a bit intimidated. It can be tricky to sort of figure out how the game sort of flows. So having these encounters definitely helps improve that. In conclusion, this game sucks. It sucks hard. This is seriously just absolutely wretched. Like, it has a few decent ideas here and there, but for the most part, it overwhelmingly just is bad. Like, this game simultaneously is too faithful to its source material, and also not faithful enough. This game pretty much completely fails to utilize the strengths of a TTRPG. TTRPGs can be, in some respects, be even more immersive than a video game, despite lacking graphics. It can be more flexible, allow for more depth and personal stories, more customization, and more player choice. But in this game, you have none of that. Really, I figure that there are two ways that this game could have been made. Either A, they could have made an MMO simulator that only changes what was absolutely necessary for the new medium, keep all the old rules, just make it an exact replica, or at least as exact as you could to the original game. Or B, rip out the guts of the MMO and create a new system designed to take advantage of the strengths of a tabletop RPG. Honestly, I very much prefer the second option, but the problem with this game is that it really does neither. It's a poor imitation of the MMO and a terrible TTRPG. It combines the worst of both worlds. Is there any way to enjoy this game? Maybe if you treated it as kind of a combat sim, with a very light sort of role-playing aspect to it. Maybe, although honestly I don't know why anyone would want to play it like that. Honestly, if you want to play a role-playing game in the world of Final Fantasy XIV, your best bet is just to take another pre-existing fantasy RPG like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder and just modify it, just homebrew a Final Fantasy XIV setting. But yeah, that will be it for today. Thank you very much for tuning in and for hopefully making it to the end of this very long and convoluted and rather rambling episode of Mike's Retro Curiosities. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. This episode is sponsored by M&M Games, and I will see you guys next time.